Hi there, welcome back. Or welcome if you're new here. I'm Chris, and I love movies, and I love talking about movies. I've kind of gone through like my Criterion and Arrow video collection. I figured today that I would talk about films that either I think about every single day of my life, or, movies that kind of altered my brain chemistry. They could be known as my favorite movies of all time, or they could even be my Letterboxd top 4, which is going to test every single headline and thumbnail and apply it to the intro of this video, and that's what we're going to do. I also had a request to talk about my Letterboxd top 4, so that's what we're doing today. I really love watching these kind of videos, and I kind of enjoy making them, and maybe you do too, and that's why you're here today. So if you can guess the theme that links some of these films, if not all of them, then let me know in the comments below, because once I kind of like lined them all up together, I was like, there's actually kind of a trend here in movies that I love. So I don't actually own these films physically, so I can't like hold on to them and like loft them around as I like to do. But one of my favorite movies is Thelma and Louise by Ridley Scott, directed in 1991. Taking a break from their dreary lives, close friends Thelma and Louise embark on a short weekend trip that ends in unforeseen, incriminating circumstances. As fugitives, both women rediscover the strength of their bond and their newfound resilience. And this is one of those films that, like, from the moment I saw it, it was just burned into my brain months on end. I think I immediately watched it 2 days later with my partner as well, because I enjoyed it so much and I knew that they would really appreciate it too. So I was like, we just have to watch it. I need to see it again as well, and I need to see it with you. There's nothing better than like introducing one of your favorite films to someone that means a lot to you and kind of like seeing their perspective on it as well. I also remember watching it like in the peak of summer in the UK last year, or maybe it was the year before, I can't quite remember. And there's just something about watching a film that is set like in an American desert in the summer. It just kind of lends itself to it quite nicely. It's got two like amazing central performances. It's got a really like nostalgic early days Hans Zimmer score as well that like feels kind of, one foot in the 80s, one foot in the 90s, if you kind of see what I mean. And the film just like moves. It really evokes things like True Romance and Bonnie and Clyde, I'm sure. There's some really heavy moments in the story as well, but they're completely offset by just how infectious the main characters and plot are. There's just such like reckless abandon in the movie that you just want to be on that journey with them. The car they drive is gorgeous. The sweeping desert landscapes of America feel mythical in a way. It kind of feels like it doesn't take place in any one particular place, but it takes place kind of like a visual idea of America. The outfits that they wear are also incredible too, like the Levi's denim, the jackets, the sort of the neckerchiefs and the sleeveless t-shirts. You just kind of want to be them, And the cinematography and the color of the film stock or the color grading is just absolutely delicious, and it's one of those films that you watch and you think, yeah, films made today don't look nice anymore. They don't look like that anymore. You just feel like your eyes are like drinking the visuals, basically. It's written by Callie Curry, but it's directed by Ridley Scott, of all people, as well, which was a huge shock to me when I saw it. The guy who, up until that point, had directed things like Alien, Blade Runner, Black Rain, which I haven't seen, but I kind of think is the sort of like macho cop drama type thing set in Japan. So maybe it's actually kind of up my street, that kind of film. It's definitely kind of like one of his sleeper hits. I think like people that really love Thelma and Louise really love it for a reason, but it's not one that like I think people are sort of shouting about when they think of Ridley Scott's work. But because it's not this like huge epic blockbuster, it's one of those films I feel like I could just watch over and over again. And this is without even getting into like the gender politics and feminist overtones of the movie as well, of which there are many and of which there's a lot of opinion about online. It's just a great, wonderful movie, It's the kind of film that makes you just want to like stick on some denim jeans, go to the desert, drive in a car and just stop off at like, 7-Elevens and gas stations and just run away from it all. Basically, It's the kind of film that makes you just want to run away from it all. My second favourite film is The Straight Story by David Lynch, released in 1999. Retired farmer and widower Alvin Straight learns one day that his distant brother Lyle has suffered a stroke and may not recover. Alvin is determined to make things right with Lyle while he still can, but his brother lives in Wisconsin while Alvin is stuck in Iowa with no car and no driver's license. He then has the idea of making the trip on his old lawnmower, thus beginning a picturesque and at times deeply spiritual odyssey. Now, if you know anything about me, which you probably don't really, David Lynch is one of my all-time favourite filmmakers. Twin Peaks was like a hugely defining piece of media for me. That includes like Fire Walk with Me, The Return, the books that Mark Frost wrote, I've actually got them on a shelf over there, the music by Angela Badalamenti, all of it really. The world, the cast, the actors, the plot, the vibe, just everything. Mulholland Drive is also one of my favourites as well. I think that was maybe the first David Lynch film I'd ever actually watched, or maybe it was my second, and it had, a huge impact on me, as all of his films do. Blue Velvet and Inland Empire terrified me, and I've kind of not revisited them since. I don't really get Wild at Heart and Lost Highway that much. I've seen them a couple of times, and I think they just might need a bit more percolation to understand. And Eraserhead is something that I've only really watched once, in fairness, and I think I'll always have a soft spot for Dune. I think I actually haven't seen The Elephant Man. I think that's the only thing I've not seen by him now. But Straight Story was always this one kind of like in his filmography that like didn't really see people talk about much, didn't really see as part of like the sort of big David Lynch canon that people think of. But like I finally got round to watching it after reading Room to Dream, which is kind of like a autobiography that he co-wrote with someone. It's probably about time I watched that film. It's on like Disney Plus or something, strangely. And it's also produced by Disney, which is also really weird. But anyway, what a film to watch. You know, it's so calm, it's so quaint. It's such like an anomaly in his filmmaking as well and in his filmography. But it sort of just like encapsulates the sweetness of David Lynch, or at least like the spirituality of some of his work. And I feel like that only really makes sense if you've seen it, because it's quite hard to put into words, because like we all know Lynch films to be like these really horrible, creepy, you know, dreamlike films, but there's also kind of like a sweetness and a romance to his films, and to things like Twin Peaks. Like, you know, there's moments of real brutality and horror and evil, but they're always offset by like good and kindness and friendship and care and spirituality. And it feels like The Straight Story kind of leans into that, you know, side of the spectrum a bit more. You know, kind of imagine all the weirdness and kitschness of a Lynch film, but no one's been murdered. There's no sex or violence. There's no presence of an omniscient evil from what I can remember. And it's just about a man trying to reconcile with his brother. But again, like Thelma and Louise, there's this touch of kind of American mythology in there. There's sweeping landscapes, there's desolate towns, empty roads, dusty road signs. There's strange characters that he comes across along the way. And the main character himself is also kind of weird. Check shirts, denim jeans, cowboy hats. There's kind of all of that imagery in there. There's kind of like a country yet dreamy soundtrack by Angelo Badalamenti. It's quite like sweeping and romantic in areas. And there's just quite a funny and poignant punchline to the whole film that I think like no ending to a film has made me laugh as much as that. And I don't know, I just thought about this film for days, and I think it sparked a bit of an interest in road trips. You know, specifically road trips across America for me. Two books that I really love, Into the Wild and Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck, both of which I actually have on my shelf, but we're not going to get into that now. But you know, these films that kind of like are road trips for America, but they also kind of deconstruct America and the sort of imagery of America that we have in our minds. But yeah, if you're a fan of David Lynch, if you're a fan of kind of like touching family dramas, if you're a fan of like Americana, then definitely give Straight Story a go. It's a really, really lovely Sunday movie, and I'm going to take a sip of water. And then speaking of driving cars, my third favourite movie is Drive My Car, released in 2021 by Ryusuke Hamaguchi. I apologise if I'm absolutely butchering his name there. Yusuke Kafuku, a stage actor and director, still unable after 2 years to cope with the loss of his beloved wife, accepts to direct a multilingual adaptation of Uncle Vanya at a theatre festival in Hiroshima. There he meets Misaki, an introverted young woman appointed to drive his car. In between rides, secrets from the past and heartfelt confessions will be unveiled. Noticing the theme yet? This is maybe one of the most outstanding films I've seen in a long while. I saw it at the Prince Charles Cinema in London. I kind of knew nothing about it. You know, I hadn't seen anything else by the filmmaker. I don't even really remember watching a trailer. I think I just knew that it was based on a collection of short stories by Haruki Murakami, who at the time I was quite into. I hadn't actually read the book that it was based on, but I figured, let's go see it. You know, it's a 3-hour Japanese film. We kind of like our Japanese cinema in this house. And we also really love the Prince Charles Cinema in London. It was a packed screening and everybody was completely silent. Like everybody was gripped with what was happening on screen. It was maybe one of the most like respectful audiences I've seen in a cinema in a while. And it's not even the most like outwardly gripping or thrilling narrative either. But I remember just feeling quite hypnotized by it. You know, when a film just completely draws you in and sort of envelops you. You know, there's so much in this film about like what's said, what's left unsaid, secrets and lies that we tell ourselves and that we tell each other, what we reveal to each other and what we kind of like hold back for ourselves. There's a lot in there about like friendship and understanding and just empathy. I've actually written empathy in bold here. But also things about like communication and language and translation and, you know, performance and art and like what you bring to art and what kind of art means to you depending on where you are in your life and what you've experienced, you know. There's this amazing scene where the main character is invited to dinner by by his colleague, and his colleague's wife is deaf. There's a scene where the main character is speaking to his colleague's wife via the colleague who's translating with sign language. And in that moment, you're like, I'm watching a film in Japanese that's being translated with English subtitles of three people having a conversation in sign language in Japanese, and they're translating it there in the moment with each other. And truly, you just hang on to every single word that is said or spoken in a way that I don't think I've experienced in a film before. And also, by the way, the whole film is taking place, you know, during rehearsals for a multilingual adaptation of Uncle Vanya. So there's just so much going on in there about, like, just how the human experience, let's say, can kind of like transcend languages. I know that sounds kind of trite, because that is just how the world works, but to see that depicted in a film is so smart and requires so much patience and trust in a filmmaker. I just can't think of another film that's done something like that. And if you have, like, let me know in the comments. I'd love to see it. The soundtrack by Ieko Ishibashi is just without question one of my favourite soundtracks of all time. It's so calming, it's so vibey and lovely and optimistic, and it kind of has like a sort of, not quite like a Studio Ghibli feeling to it, but when you listen to it, you just want to be driving through the Japanese countryside, let's put it that way. It's honestly one of the best films ever made. Like, is it wrong to say that? Or at least made in the 21st century? I think if there's like any takeaway from this video, it's just like, please watch Drive My Car. It's wonderful, and I just can't wait for the day that I watch Drive My Car again. I've only seen it twice, I think, but it's the kind of film that I just know that the next time I watch it, I'm going to be bringing so much more to it, or I'm going to be in a different headspace or part of my life where the film is going to reveal different things to me, basically. And I think that's the power of a really good movie, or even like with literature and art, in that like it will change every time you come to it. And then my fourth and final favourite film, which I've actually got here physically with me, but it's going to be quite hard to hold on to, is The Lord of the Rings. And I think specifically The Fellowship of the Ring as well. You know, directed by Peter Jackson. I think I owe it all to these movies, you know? Like, what am I even supposed to say? I know I just said this about Drive My Car, but I think this is genuinely the best film ever made, or at least it's the best film series ever made. Or to go one further, it's maybe the greatest like tent-pole blockbuster franchise ever made. All three films are just such an accomplishment, but I think the first one has a special place in my heart because of just how rewatchable and linear the whole thing is. Like, sure, The Two Towers and Return of the King might have some of the greatest moments in the series, but you can't watch them without watching the first one. And I think it's just as simple as that, really. It's like when you think about like Toy Story, like, yeah, Toy Story 3 is probably the best one, but it's like, I have to watch Toy Story 1 and 2. I can't watch just one of them. You have to watch them all together, you know? But I think they're also maybe one of the final examples of a franchise film being made purely in service of story. You know, every single detail, every single decision made is all in service of telling the story and making you believe what you're seeing on camera. There's not a cynical bone in the body of these films, you know? I think when we think about, or at least when I think about, like, contemporary filmmaking and blockbuster filmmaking, there is a tendency to think like, you know, these films have to be adaptations or reboots, or they have to be sequels or based on something that we all know and love. And true, Lord of the Rings is one of the most popular pieces of fantasy literature of all time, but it hadn't really made its mark on the film canon or the mind of popular culture up until this point, really. Yes, there was that like animated version that came out in the 70s, but that did not have a cultural impact in the way that this did. But anyway, I digress. I also think Lord of the Rings has taught me so much about perseverance, mostly, friendship and fellowship, no pun intended, but also just good as a force of nature as well. There's quite an underrated Gandalf line that I really love.
There are other forces at work in this world, Frodo, besides the will of evil. Bilbo was meant to find the ring, in which case you also were meant to have it. And that is an encouraging thought.
That's like everything that's going on in the world, and with every hardship that you come across in life, we like to think of these things as forces of evil that are prevailing over the good all the time. I'm not a religious person by any stretch, but I just quite like the quiet optimism of that, of like, there are other forces in the world. You know, there are people out there that are trying to do good, and there are people that try and approach things every day with a sense of good in their mind. And we just often forget about that because it's hard to remember the good when things are so difficult in life. But you know, I just think films just kind of aren't about these things anymore. I think Project Hail Mary came close to it recently, which I've talked about on the channel before. But when I think about like big tentpole epic fantasy blockbusters, it doesn't feel like these films are about a bunch of mates just looking out for each other. They're kind of about defeating the big bad, which this film is also about, but there's a lot of kind of like character development and embodiment in these films too that I think is very overlooked in filmmaking these days. You know, Elijah Wood is Frodo. Ian McKellen is Gandalf. Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Sam, Merry, Pippin, Elrond, Galadriel, even the rest of the hobbits in the Shire that don't even have speaking lines, they all feel like they're there. You know, they all feel like, you know, they're real. And I'm sorry, but like these films just feel real. They just feel like they actually happened and they take place somewhere. It's probably why I like fantasy. It's probably why I like film so much. And it's probably why I have an interest in literature as well, or even, you know, classic literature to an extent. And honestly, I think this is just one of those franchises that just gets better the more and more you watch it and the older you get, and the kind of memories and life experiences that you bring to it, and how your life and Lord of the Rings kind of like fold in with each other when you come across other people that, you know, it means a lot to. How you can kind of quote it with friends and family, and things that you see out in the world kind of remind you of Lord of the Rings, and, you know, moments that happen in your life kind of remind you of overcoming obstacles and challenges in your life as well. You know, before, I think I loved it for the world building and the action and all the set pieces and how thrilling it was. But now I kind of just love it for the quieter moments, you know, the moments where the film has a lot of humanity. Sam taking his furthest steps away from home than he's ever been. Aragorn pulling Sam to his feet after the Mines of Moria and kind of letting him know that he needs to, you know, pull himself up, you know, for the sake of Frodo. The moment where Merry and Pippin sacrifice themselves to save Frodo as well is just, there's so much unsaid in the look that they give each other. Gimli toiling over the fact that the Fellowship is broken, but Aragorn pulling the three of them together. Those are just moments of just such lovely friendship and heroism and humanity that I just think it's perfect. It's perfect. This film is perfect. If you ask me right now, do you want to watch The Fellowship of the Ring? I would just say yes every single time. I am quite worried about the hunt for Gollum. You know, I really want it to do well. I know there's a lot of kind of positivity and momentum behind it as well. You know, for a trilogy of films that just does so much on its own 2 feet, The Hunt for Gollum and The Hobbit, it does rely a lot on your kind of shared memory of these films, that I worry that they kind of lean too heavily on nostalgia and fan service to warrant being a thing in the first place. But I guess we'll just see. I'm rooting for Andy Serkis, but I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about the whole thing, really, because films aren't the same anymore. There's still good stuff out there, but the sort of standard is different. But anyway, that's kind of it. That's my sort of top 4 films. Thanks for watching. I've been thinking about maybe doing a tour of the bookshelf that I have behind me. I have had a request for that in the comments. I've also been thinking about maybe doing a kind of reading vlog. I've kind of been dipping my toes into manga and anime recently, and I really want to read Berserk, and I just figured it might be quite fun to buy one of those volumes and just vlog reading them, because I kind of know very little about them. I enjoy fantasy. I also play Elden Ring, and I think, you know, Elden Ring borrows a lot from things like Berserk. So that's kind of it, really. Let me know what you thought of these films in the comments below. Let me know what your 4 favourites are as well and why. I'd be really intrigued to hear what films you consider to be defining films for you. And yeah, click like and subscribe. Those things really help as well. And I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye-bye. Bye-bye.